Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for coming back. I'm your host, a guy that's more electrifying, magnifying, and terrifying than Freddie and Jason combined, John R. Hydus, and I think we got a hellacious Friday the 13th interview set up for you today. We're joined with Hoboken 2nd Ward Councilwoman Tiffanie Fisher. Tiffanie, thanks for joining me.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
On Friday the 13th.
Perfect, very appropriate given the current climate in Hoboken. So, obviously, this may not have been your favorite week in politics. Clearly the Hoboken Democratic Committee wanted to go in another direction, and this was not a surprise. I mean, you knew this was coming, but now that you've had a few days to reflect, I mean, are you upset, perturbed, indifferent? What's your reaction when you're looking back on it now?
I've literally spent a lot of time this week trying to think about what the answer to that question is, because a lot of people have reached out, and I really appreciate everyone who's reached out and asked me if I'm okay, which I'm totally okay. I think some of it's disappointed, some of it is I just think maybe it's unfortunate. I mean, this time last year, we were working really hard to put together a group of, 67 people to run for election for this committee. There was a ton of energy. It was a great group of people. And then on election day, primary election day last year, 63 of our 67 won. And it was really exciting about the prospects of what that meant for Democrats and just, being part of just that enthusiasm and energy. And also for me, when I was elected chair, it was also the idea of bringing everyone together, not just the 63 that was part of my slate, but also the others that weren't part of the slate, but just bring everyone in Hoboken together that is a Democrat. It was like being above local politics, which I just feel very strongly was really important. And we accomplished a lot. We were able to change poll workers. We have some corruption within our polls. We were able to make some changes to poll workers. We were able to connect with a number of campaigns across the state, as well as Governor Murphy's campaign last fall, and really, begin the process of being active, even with the backdrop of kind of our challenging local politics. And, I was excited at the beginning of this year, and I very quickly knew in January that not everyone felt similarly. And as you mentioned, it wasn't a surprise what happened Monday night. So, disappointing for me personally, because it was something that I was interested in doing, and it's really unfortunate that local politics got in the way.
So, as you know, at the meeting, there was a lot of talk about, there hadn't been any meetings since you were elected chair, and, the committee said they couldn't work with you, and a couple other things. I mean, I won't rehash it. Clearly you were there, but, what was your take on all that?
My take, I would say that there's circumstances around, what happened over the last, since last summer. A lot of what occurred in our local political scene, in our local election, and the polarization of our community, I think, carried over into the activities of this. I mean, in the fall, our committee as a group decided really to just focus on everyone's local election and doing what we can to support Governor Murphy going into November, and we are really going to prioritize bringing everyone together in January and focusing on the midterm elections. So what I would say to that is I was just disappointed that they created a narrative that I just don't think was true. It was a difficult environment for what was originally Mayor Bala's, primarily made up of a lot of Mayor Bala's supporters, which isn't a surprise, and nothing wrong with that. This entire committee was basically put together off the back of Mayor Zimmer and who I was going to support, and then Councilman Bala at the time. But just that dynamic in our local election just made it a little bit challenging for everyone to come together. And then I was really looking forward to having the election behind us and kind of starting fresh in 2018. And I think that local politics just kind of got in the way, and I think it impacts people's perspective on what's happened over the last couple months.
Okay, and then prior to the committee voting on rescinding you as chair, you made a mention that you'd sought a legal opinion from the Hudson County Democratic Organization, and they said that most of what occurred was illegal, and there is potential for a legal challenge based on that opinion. I mean, I haven't seen it, but given that you have, I mean, have you given any thought if you're going to actually proceed with an appeal of any sort?
So just a couple corrections. I spent a lot of time personally trying to understand if the approach that they were taking, fit within our bylaws, fit within Robert's rules, fit within whatever statutory, laws there are in the state that affect this, and I know that they did as well. And you could see the legal support behind what they were doing. And it was the end of last week that actually someone from the HCDO reached out to me and said that they had a problem with this. They said that this is this process that they're undertaking is unlawful. It's not consistent with bylaws. It's not consistent with the statutory requirements and Robert's rules. And the example they gave, could you just imagine what this would do to all political parties across the state if they were to be able to unseat a leader through an administrative action like this? Like, it would literally be chaos, and people were and still are pretty concerned about this as a precedent setting. So I would say there's a lot of people that we're talking about, is this something they should challenge? I'm not sure I'm the best person to lead that challenge. Like, if it's really this big of a deal across, the political party landscape in the state, it's someone other than me that, needs to determine whether or not we should move forward, so.
And who issued that legal opinion?
Sorry. And it wasn't, so we're clear, it wasn't, so what happened was after the original conversation I had on, I'm going to say Thursday or Friday, I was contacted by a couple of lawyers that work with the HCDO, and had a series of conversations over the weekend, gave them information about what was being undertaken, and then I received it wasn't a legal opinion. It was, and there's a technical. It wasn't specifically set up as a legal opinion. It was like a memo with legal advice in it, outlining the case law that supports their various positions on 5 or 6 of the procedures that they were undertaking. So that was provided by a lawyer named Craig Dowd, but there were other lawyers that I had spoken to over the weekend about it. That basically some that I talked to on my own that I know, and then others relating to the county that I had spoken to that I would say there is general consensus view on those. So I sent those as soon as I got the memo, or the memo. It was an email, a long email, or an attachment to an email. Literally the second I got it, I forwarded that to the executive committee and said, what do you want to do with this? Like, this is new information that I received on Monday. What do you want to do? And I heard back 2 hours later that they still wanted to go forward with the meeting. And I said, okay. And then I sent it out to the rest of the committee just to let them know what advice that, as chair of the committee, I had received from council.
And finally, as far as the local Democratic Committee goes, obviously today Phil Cohen's the chair, and before you left, you said you were still interested in working with the committee, of course, on Democratic issues. Is that still something that you plan on doing and feel comfortable doing? Yeah,
of course. Like, I am a Democrat, true and true, and I consider myself a Bernie Sanders Democrat. There's a lot to do this year. There's a lot we can do in the state of New Jersey. There's a number of competitive, outside of Hudson County, we don't have as many competitive races, given we, have such a huge percentage of Democrats in our county, but there's a number of competitive congressional races that I definitely want to, work with local Democrats and help. I actually have, in addition, I have a friend of mine from high school named Tedra Cobb, who is running for a congressional seat in upstate New York. That's another seat that has a Republican incumbent in it, and if she wins the primary, I even want to go, it's in the far reaches of New York, New York 21, but I even want to go and do what I can to help her if she wins the primary. So I'm excited people know I love elections, I love campaigning, I love door knocking. I'm happy to go out and canvass and be as supportive as I can.
Okay, and actually my apologies, but I forgot to mention that also on this topic, some people on the committee, maybe a handful to a dozen, I don't know the exact number, but they've expressed some disappointment, outrage, whatever you want to call it, that you supported Jen Giantino's mayoral campaign, and obviously at the time she was a Republican. So what's your reaction to that?
My reaction to that. So when I made the decision last fall, our local elections are nonpartisan. To me, they're nonpartisan. And I made a really, really difficult decision last fall. At the time, Councilman Bala was a friend, Councilwoman Giattino was a friend, and I decided to get behind Councilwoman Giattino because I thought she was the best fit for Hoboken. I just thought we had an opportunity to consider change. There were a lot of things that we needed, a lot of areas where we needed to make change, and I just thought that Councilwoman Giattino was best positioned for that. The fact that she was a registered Republican, interestingly, I didn't even realize immediately at the time. As everyone knows, she has since switched parties from Republican to Democrat. And the reason why she made that shift, quite honestly, is, and what I saw as a person, is she's probably one of the most progressive people I know. Like, throughout the campaign, she would say things and I would look at her and go, "No, Jen, you do realize that's like a Democratic, view on something." And we said it a lot. And so I just felt very comfortable with her. That being said, I also don't want to take away from people that are, Democrats, through and through, that no matter what could never get behind a Republican. That's not how I feel at a nonpartisan local level, but I recognize that that is how some people feel. And I talked with those people on the committee, and I can't undo what I did, and I'm totally respectful for how they feel. I just don't feel, I don't feel the same about it, so.
All right, understood. Okay, so now moving on for real. This whole Democratic committee stuff is becoming quite interesting around the county because Vincent Prado doesn't appear to be seeking another term, and State Senator and the Union City Mayor, Brian Stack, he's expressed great interest in being the next chair. He's campaigning hard, as you're well aware. So do you think that's the right move for the HCDO right now?
Do I think it's the right move for Brian Stack to be the chair of the HCDO?
Well, do you think it's the best thing for the Hudson County Democrats, let's put it that way?
I have a... I don't know Senator Stack that well. I've met him a few times. I've sat down and talked to him a few times. I think he's done a lot of great things for, in particular, his constituents in Hoboken. He and I have talked about constituent services, especially for people that, are underserved. So I'm positive towards him as it relates to a lot of what he's done locally. I don't know if anyone's running against him. I'm not opposed to him being chair of the Democratic committee. I would want to do whatever we can to work with him. But like right now, if without knowing if someone else is going to run against him, it's hard to say, definitely he's the best guy for the job, but I'm positively predisposed to him. So that's kind of the best I think I can say about it.
So similarly, you're also quite well aware that, Senator Stack and Jersey City Mayor Stephen Fulop, they're leading a charge of officials that say we need a change at the county level. They want to replace Tom DeGise as county executive next year. They haven't announced a candidate. So again, it's a similar situation, but where do you stand on that?
So similar situation that they haven't announced a candidate. So I've met with Tom DeGise, or County Executive DeGise. I've spoken with both Mayor Fulop and briefly with Mayor Fulop, but Senator Stack, and that conversation happened more in the context of, at the same time, was when Mayor Bala had that meeting with voting members of the Democratic Committee and gave them the opportunity to meet Senator Stack that I wasn't invited to. So at the time I had reached out to connect with him on that because it was fairly frustrating. But at the time, because it was like right when this whole war was announced, I met with County Executive DeGise, I met with Senator Stack, and first of all, I have a good relationship with our county executive. I actually have a good relationship with a number of the freeholders as well. I'm probably, versus, and hopefully I'm not offending anyone, but I feel like I, more than any other city council person, has spent a lot of time with our budget, a lot of time on this issue about what allocation of county taxes we get. I've spent the most time talking with our own freeholder and other freeholders on what we can do kind of at the county level to get more money spent into Hoboken, and they are open to it, and the county's done a lot for us, and I like our county executive, and the county has always been at the receiving end of phone calls to offer assistance, whether it's the executive, whether it's Freeholder Romano, whether it's the county engineer Tom Malvasi, and various other people. So that being said, I know I might be rambling. when this happened, I think the one thing where I feel like the county has not done a good job, and it resonated with me on some of what Mayor Fulop and Senator Stack said, was there's a couple of places where I feel like the county, we're a really important county in the state, and the county just needs to have a bigger seat at the table. And the biggest one for me is transportation. I can't tell you how many Senate hearings I've been to, Port Authority board meetings, a number of meetings where I'm there to advocate for Hoboken, and I end up being literally the only person from Hudson County there. And so I said that to County Executive Geese, that what resonated with me is I would like to see our county executive and our county have a bigger seat at the table on some bigger issues for the city, including, we have a lot of social services. We have a correction facility. We have, social services, family services within our county. And a couple years ago, we were dramatically impacted negatively by cuts that Governor Christie put into place, and I just don't know that we did enough to make sure that we tried to get as much of that funding into our county, given the services that the broader services we provide. So I am supportive of our current county executive. I have no idea who they're considering, running against them, and I'll be open to hearing who that is. But I would love to see having kind of a bigger seat at the table, and it's what I said to him when I met with him.
All right then.
And I'm hopeful.
Always. So, as you know, Mayor Bala has already joined with Mayor Fulop and Senator Stack. He believes we need a change. And a lot of people throughout this whole 6 months since the election have identified you as an opponent of the mayor. He goes left, you go right, etc. So, what do you think when you hear that kind of rhetoric online or elsewhere, in person, wherever?
So I get this question a lot, and it comes in, sorry, not saying that you're not original, but what do I say to that? First of all, there's absolutely no truth that if he goes left, I go right, or whatever at all. He and I have worked together for the last, even before I was elected, we worked together even before I was elected. We worked great together, had a lot of shared views on our Hoboken's agenda for the last couple years. And as I said to him right after he got elected, I expect to support probably his entire agenda, just given that, and I would expect most of the city council to support his entire agenda, because we've kind of converged on way more common ground than differences. We're doing a lot together in the government. He asked me to join a steering committee for effectively economic development. It's targeted towards a special improvement district, but we're having discussions on economic development for the first time, bringing in businesses into the conversation. The only other council person on it is Councilwoman Falco. I'm working really closely with him on everything relating to Union Dry Dock. I'm working really closely. I applied and they approved me being on the Citizen Advisory Group for Rebuild by Design. The only other council person on that is Jim Doyle. So there's a lot of really big initiatives that I'm working really closely with the mayor on, and there's even working with him on the budget. Like that, everything on a policy basis, I think we're really coordinated with, and that's important to me because I'm a bit of a policy wonk, according to Augie Torres a couple years ago. I still am, and I really just want to do the right thing for Hoboken. Am I going to agree with him on everything? No. I'm not going to agree on any mayor on everything, and if there's something I think is important to Hoboken and he has a different stand, I will absolutely feel comfortable taking the opposing stand. That being said, the politics side of it, it has been a little bit challenging, and I will tell you that I feel more reactive to maybe some of the challenges that are being faced as opposed to proactive, and I just hope that whatever challenges that we have politically, that over time they'll get better. So.
Okay, and we will touch on Union Dry Dock and Rebuild by Design, but on this topic, there was one published report that said he's already planned on running a completely new council slate in 2019. So, in the event that somebody came up to you from the administration and said, would you like to run with us again? What would we have to do to get you to run with us again? Would those be conversations you'd even entertain at this point?
Listen, I will always entertain, working with whoever wants to come together as a team. This election is a year and a half out. I definitely, as of right now, feel like I'm going to run again. I'm going to work really hard to continue doing as much good as I can for the second ward, for all of Hoboken, and hope that I have enough support and people behind me that will support me, like officially announcing. And you know, I'll tell you, the hardest part, the thing that makes me wince, and even now, about being an elected official is the politics side of things and the us versus them and the, you know, enemies that end up being created in elections. I was actually very lucky in my election because I actually didn't have that. I ran against Peter Biancamano, I ran against Bonnie Murray, you know, at the time, and I have a very nice relationship with both of them, but there wasn't, you know, no enemies were created coming out of the second ward race of 2015, and that's my comfort zone. So I love the idea of just working collegially with people, and maybe that's Pollyannish going into our election. So I'm just hopeful that when we go into the election that you know, there's an opportunity to just respectfully be either on the same side or on the other side, and the goal is not to create enemies. That, you know, it felt like that was some of the goal in the last election.
All right. Okay, so like I said, we'll bring it back. You did dry dock. Obviously, this is something that's ongoing. It looked like, you know, the city was going to buy the property, and then it looked like NJ Transit was going to buy the property. And again, this is something you know well, so I won't go too much into the details. But basically, where do we stand today, and what are you hearing from your constituents on what they want to see happen in the near future and the long-term future?
So, first of all, let's address constituents first, because I literally got an email from a constituent just before I came here who, you know, who was not, his view was not consistent with what my personal view is and what I feel that most of Hoboken feels. Doesn't make his view wrong, and I told him that. I think everyone's view is important here. But I would say the majority of constituents that I've spoken to, you know, are part of what has been a decades-long fight to preserve our waterfront for public enjoyment, is the way I would describe it. You know, this started 3 decades ago around the waterfront referendum vote that happened, where we defeated the Port Authority from them building, you know, 3 million square feet of effectively luxury residential and commercial right on the waterfront near the PATH train. And that was a Herculean effort, and anyone who's watching, they should look up Hoboken waterfront referendum and just read the stories at the time. No social media, really, really unbelievable win. But since then, and a lot of those people still live in Hoboken, and so this is like the tail end of what has been a really long fight. And I think it's important that in this kind of debate and discussion with all of the stakeholders, that you have to go in with a strong view so that every view is considered. You don't start negotiating against yourself. So a strong view representing a lot of people in Hoboken is, what can we do that we don't create an expanded industrial use on the existing site there? I think everyone I've spoken to is supportive of New York Waterway or ferry service across the water, just wants to consider a better like match of uses. Like we have an industrial transportation hub at the southern part of Hoboken that's owned by New Jersey Transit. Why can't that be expanded to include ferry servicing, maintenance, etc.? We have a ferry terminal, a small one, on the north end. You know, why can't that be expanded a little bit just to have maybe storage of some of their boats? Why can't some of their refueling or maintenance actually be in Bayonne or another site along the Gold Coast that already has like an established industrial transportation use? My concern about this site is, yes, it has an industrial use there that hasn't had a huge impact on, you know, the neighboring areas, but this is about taking that site and having a dramatic expansion of industrial use kind of right in the middle of a residential area. So that's kind of what I feel. It's what I feel most people feel, but I will tell you that there's definitely a contingent of people that I think they don't want to see New York Waterway shut down, which I promise, I shouldn't say I promise, but I can't imagine under any scenario that would happen. I think there's some people that would like to see us have a working shoreline, and I'm not opposed to a working shoreline. I'm just not supportive of an expanded working shoreline in that location. As it relates to kind of where we are now, you know, where we are now is good news, bad news. The bad news is we've retracted eminent domain. That was kind of our big tool. But the good news is it was done in the context of trying to get everyone around the table to come up with a better alternative. A few people met with Mayor Bala last Sunday night and talked about a path forward. He has reached out to a number of the stakeholders again, as well as some additional mayors, to see if there's ways that we can get support for a different location for New York Waterway and to meet with New York Waterway as well. We're going to have a rally next Friday night right at the Maxwell Park for anyone who wants to come out and really defend our waterfront, express concerns about legacy contamination and the potential for that being disrupted and creating more contamination, which is really important to us. So we're just going to still continue to fight this, and that's it. I said a lot, sorry.
That's okay.
You should ask me to pause in the middle and ask a question in the middle, or I'll just keep going.
I noticed. That's okay.
As people know.
Yeah, it's all right. So, as you know as well, New York Waterway was only going to be able to station in Weehawken, at least as of today, till June 1st. So do you think this is something that could get resolved between now and then?
First of all, I'm not sure we know definitively it's June 1st. At one point it was March 1st. At one point it was August 1st. I've never personally seen anything in writing that says it's June 1st, but let's go with that assumption that it is June 1st. Do I think something will be resolved? I think it can, because there are existing sites that could receive their activities. They may not be all in one location, but they could. We could receive storage of ferries down at Lackawanna. We could receive storage of ferries in other sites up and down the river. We could, Bayonne absolutely could provide refueling and maintenance immediately, because they have those facilities down there. I'm hopeful. I don't know if it'll happen, but I'm hopeful.
And as far as you know, I don't know if you've communicated directly with the governor's office, but do you have a pretty clear idea, one way or the other, on what Governor Murphy's view is on this?
I would say I don't have a clear idea. I would say that my understanding right now is there's a lot of people that are in there. There's a lot of moving parts, right? We have Bayonne that is looking to expand and get ferry service into Bayonne. They're in an RFP process. We have a mayoral election there that muddies the water a little bit. We have a port authority that's interested in having expanded service, ferry service out of Bayonne as well. We have a governor who's very focused on environmental concerns, that doesn't want to see contamination, et cetera, up and down the waterfront, but also at the same time wants to ensure that we have continued ferry service and no disruption to that. But we have a letter and kind of a commitment from New Jersey Transit and the governor's office, effectively saying that they're committed to doing a study and working with all stakeholders to see if we can, come up with a better solution that meets all the stakeholder requirements. So I'm hopeful somewhere embedded in that. If we can't, I'd like to see it resolved before, let's say, June 1st, but if it can't be, that the momentum doesn't stop and we continue to move forward. The one thing I think that's important to say, though, my understanding is New York Waterway currently has no permits to operate there, and they're in the process of applying for a DEP permit. Now, there's a lot of people that think that DEP permit application is significantly deficient. The city has, a number of people have responded and objected and given comments on the application. But, the DEP, in order for New York Waterway to even operate, they're going to have to get a DEP permit, whether it's an official permit or they're going to get some sort of emergency permit. But they're going to have that before they can do anything, and I don't think that they're even targeted to have that until May.
Interesting. Okay. And now also, regarding the Hoboken waterfront and really the whole city, the Rebuild by Design project, it's a big deal. Needless to tell you, $230 million, working with a lot of other agencies like HUD, and I don't even know how many, but I'm sure that's, remember it's quite a few. So just tell us, it's been a long time since I personally heard an update on Rebuild by Design. Probably well before the mayoral election, to say at least 8 months. So what exactly is going on there?
So probably the biggest and best news that happened sometime in October is we were approved for funding from HUD, the federal government, and the monies, the $230 million, was transferred and is now sitting with DEP. So we are a fully funded project, and we had to jump through hoops, and a lot of that, quite frankly, was Mayor Zimmer really leading the charge to make sure that we've been able to hit every major milestone so that we could get that money. So now we have the money. But and there's a number of rebuild by design projects in the area, and we're literally the only ones that are on target and on time and on target with the project. So now where we are with the project is we've decided it's been decided where the installation of the flood barriers will be, and now we're in the design phase. So we'll spend like the next year and a half working with the community to come up with a physical design. So this is a combination, in simple terms, of like structure, the vertical piece that is the barrier, but then the landscaping, over it that makes it more part of our environment. However, so it's exciting. We don't have as much of a gun to our head, but we're still sticking to a federally prescribed timeline that says we have to have this done by 2022. So it's like 2 years design, 2 years construction. However, one of the biggest issues that we're having right now, a lot of the focus leading up to this time was the north end, which is predominantly in my ward. All of the installation goes through the second ward. We didn't spend a lot of time on the southern installation, and that is now a pretty material problem, because there were two options to install effectively a vertical wall. That one would be on the south side of the New Jersey Transit development that runs along, from the path, the proposed development from the path along Observer Highway, and option two would be on the north side, so just running along Observer Highway, that would then put the development in between a wall and the tracks. So because we haven't progressed enough on the New Jersey Transit development discussion, there's a lot of work that had to be done on this site to move some physical structures that the DEP said couldn't be done within this timeline. So the DEP has selected the north alignment. So as of right now, there potentially is a wall that will go along the north side of the New Jersey, the proposed New Jersey Transit development. As you can imagine, that all but makes that project not feasible. So this has gotten the attention clearly of New Jersey Transit, Elcor, the developer, the governor, and there's a lot of people at a pay grade higher than me that are working and trying to work with the DEP and the federal government to see if there's a way that we can marry these two projects better, and that wall can move back to the south side and the development can be more feasible, and it would just be better for Hoboken. But that it's a huge issue for Hoboken right now, and for all parties. For New Jersey Transit, probably as much as it is for Hoboken. So a lot of people working on it. We'll hope we'll get resolution soon.
Marriage is a big commitment, so I'm told.
Yes, marriage is a big commitment, so I'm told as well.
Well, let's see. That seems like something worth following. So the last thing that I had in mind today was that you and Mayor Bala actually seem to be on the same page when it comes to letting the voter fraud. Let me backtrack a second on voter fraud, but he does not, but for the same reason, he doesn't think that the voters should be deciding on whether runoffs could come back, but yet you're on the other side of the spectrum saying for that reason the voters should have a choice to decide why runoffs should come back, and that'll be on the November ballot, and they'll make their choice, and we'll see what happens from there, obviously. But why do you think that this is a good thing for the voters, residents in the Mile Square City? So I'm kind of separating the two issues for a second. I'm definitely I've probably been the loudest public voice against voter fraud in the last couple of years. I know there's been a whole history before me, and I don't want to take away from those efforts, but I've witnessed it. I've been very public about it. And part of the reason that I wanted to fight so hard for the Democratic Committee was so that we could get in and we could make changes to poll workers, which we were able to do in a number of polling locations in the fall. So it is an issue. I know it's had the eyes of a number of agencies. We hear about it. You hear about it from locals. You hear about it, word of mouth. And I think it's something that we still need to pursue. And I think, as we've said,
it's not Mayor Bala's, it's not up to him, it's not his responsibility, but given that we have now a great relationship with our Attorney General, I'm hopeful that we can maybe have more connectivity with the state to maybe be able to bring some state resources in, to look into this. So it's still very important to me, and as you said, it's very important to Mayor Bala. I just think as it relates to voting, my concern earlier, and I was pretty public about this too, is that I think we need to separate the two, and I also think we need to actually look at the historic numbers around our elections, and I just think they're misrepresented. The thing about Hoboken is Hoboken voters come out for important elections. They all do. People that are paid come out, and people that are not paid come out. And so even in a low turnout election, the volume of people that come out in our local elections is very significant. We had 15,000 people vote, just of note, in last year's mayoral election. Typically, we're 20-30% lower than whoever's at the top of the ballot, and basically the same number of people that came out to vote for the mayor actually voted for the governor. So it's really our local elections and the activity around our local elections that almost drive turnout for every other election. So I think the reason why I'm willing to let voters decide again, for the same reason voters decided, last time it was an issue that was brought up by Mayor Zimmer. I've spoken with Mayor Zimmer and her husband about this, and it was driven by both, concerns about voter fraud, but also just the cost of the election. Mayor Zimmer tragically, she still has a few $100,000 of debt, I think, that of her own money, effectively, that she put into her election. So she had a lot of, she had a big financial stake with having multiple elections. But, there were circumstances at the time that I think led to those votes, and I don't think anyone contemplated having the type of election that we just had previously and having elected officials win with such a small percentage of the vote. So we heard it everywhere. And I can tell you that for, my ward in particular has probably the highest number of people, percentage-wise, that voted against the runoffs or voted for ending runoffs last time. But when I reached out to people, when I heard from people, normally when I email, I get responses from 50 to 70 people. I reached out, Mayor Bala had reached out, telling people to reach out to me. I heard from 15 or 16, the majority of which were supportive of runoffs, and a few people that, didn't want to consider this vote again. And so, listen, the result of the election in November may be exactly where we are right now, but I think, recent circumstances are such that people wanted a second chance of voting on it, and that's all we're giving them, a second chance on voting on it.
Well, there you have it, folks. Democracy still potentially a good thing in Hudson County. I'm as shocked as you are. So anything else you want to give us in parting thoughts here, Tiffanie? No,
I think the one thing I would say is that, I actually think our government locally works pretty well together. I've spent the last 2 years trying to get consensus. I think we, on pretty much every vote, I can tell you since the beginning of the year, on 98% of the votes, we're somewhere between a 7-2 and a 9-0 on everything that the administration has put out. I work really, really hard with, right now we're in budget season, and I've worked really hard to get input from every single council member so that our budget amendment, which there will be one, reflects the input and priorities of all council members. I'm trying to work as constructively as possible, with the administration, which is not difficult to do. And I just want people to know that the government actually, irrespective of the political noise that's out there right now, the government itself, the city council, and the administration actually are working together 99% of the time. And that's what residents of Hoboken should want, and that's what I want. And I'm committed to doing that.
The system still works. Let's see how it goes. Right. Tiffanie, thanks so much.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Everyone, enjoy your Freaky Friday and have a fantastic weekend.